What's up, everybody? This is Joel here from Big Brother Canada, season number 4. It's been a couple weeks since BB Can 6 has come to a close, with Paris being crowned as the new winner. And I'm very lucky today to have a very special guest from Big Brother Canada, season number 6. It is the Ginger himself, the juror number 1 on BB Can 6, Ryan Ballantine. Ryan, how's it going?
I'm good, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to be on the air with you. I'm fangirling a little bit because I got to watch you on TV, so it's weird to kind of be in that family now.
Yeah, it's a very surreal thing, I can tell you, especially when you're like really fresh out of the house right now, which you kind of still are. You're only a couple of weeks removed from basically like being cooped up in solitary confinement, so to speak, for that amount of time. And you can now relate to me a little bit, having been in there for so long.
Yeah, it's a crazy experience. I've been telling people, when they ask me, they say it's really weird because you hate so much of your time in the house, and yet you love every minute of it. The minute that's over, you forget almost immediately about the idea that you're completely cut off from the outside world and you only saw certain people for so long. And then you get right back into it and you're like, I'd go do that again if they asked.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's with virtually every single person that has played Big Brother Canada that is like that. So, let's set this up for you guys. We are live right now on a Google Hangout. I am monitoring the chat right now. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send them in to the live chat right now. So what we're going to do is we are going to break down I almost called you Spencer there. I jumped the gun.
It's the big red beard. It's happened.
Right. Yeah, exactly. like everybody who is red-haired and has a beard from now on, who plays BBUS or BB Canada, is going to be either like, people are going to think of you or Dallas or Spencer, all of those people. It's like anybody with glasses, they're going to be like Joel, Steve, Ian, etc.
When I put the bow tie on, I thought of you.
Oh my God.
Andrew left the bow tie for me, and I was like, I've got a Joel look going.
Would you believe it that I never wore a single bow tie before being on Big Brother Canada? I swear to God, I didn't even know how to tie the freaking thing. I had to get one of the crew people to help me tie a stupid bow tie. So,
I believe it, but as soon as I put it on, I was like,
yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let's start off with, I want to address a bit of an elephant in the room, and this is probably something completely unbeknownst to you, but I was a guest on McCrae and Cameron's podcast.
Okay.
During about the midway point of the game, just before jury. It was during the double eviction when Hamza got evicted from the house. And in that, McCrae said that he had heard word from Spencer, and that Spencer told him that he was, in fact, Ryan, yourself. Can you address these issues and these rumors? Is Spencer you?
Okay, I am not Spencer. I was rooting for Spencer. Spencer is. It's entirely possible he's me. I'm not sure. Metaphysically, he could be, but I'm. I'm not him, but I'm not sure if he's me. I'm gonna have to do some more investigating into that. I don't think he's me, but we do have a similar look. That's for sure.
But your mind is racing right now, right? You're like running things in your head.
I'm afraid of finding out that turns out I'm just actually a figment of Spencer's imagination.
You may have inadvertently been cloned and you just don't know it.
Well, our games turned out about the same. So.
Yeah, give or take. Sure. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Our mouth got us into trouble.
Now that we got the most important burning question out of the way, let's actually get into the game. So first off, I want to know from you, before even going in to the house, you talked a lot in your pregame interviews about that you had all the tools to be one of the greatest supervillains of all time. Was that just sort of you talking it up to hype up yourself to the audience, or was that how you were actually like trying to go into the house with that sort of mentality?
I think anybody that can play this game has the capability of being a supervillain. Um, However, I found once I got in the house, I think when you're watching at the level that I watch, which is every episode, I watch every episode. I'm not a feeder. I'm not anything. I'm not that guy. But when you watch every episode, you look at it as, oh well, I could bullshit these people. I could lie to these people. It's not a big deal. What's 3 hours a week? But it's not 3 hours a week. It's 168 hours a week. And I'm generically in my real life a pretty good person. So as a result, when you get into the house, it's hard to completely just divorce yourself from who you are outside the house. And so I felt like, it was little things, when people were cold in the catacombs, I gave them my clothes to wear because they would make good outside layers. Because I'm a bigger guy. So like Kayla, you wore my bathrobe all the time because she could literally use it as a sleeping bag because she's such a tiny person. So it was little things like that where I'm like, you know what? I'm actually not a super villain. I'm not the villain I wanted to be. And I couldn't put it aside. And I don't know whether or not I'd be able to in the future. I like to think that I could turn on people if I needed to. But in order to turn on people, people have to be working with you. And that never happened for me. So it's hard to stab somebody in the back when everybody's watching your knife from the front.
So did you go into the house with an idea that there would be some people wanting to work with you? Because like when I was looking at the cast, I was like, Ryan's a super fan. So when you're a super fan, you look at the game as like, how do you see yourself, but how do other people see you, and how do I kind of go from there? You probably assumed I'm thinking that you were going to be in there with like 20-something-year-olds for the most part, right?
Yeah, I expected a young cast because young cast is what you get in every season. I didn't expect to be the oldest man there. Because typically the old guy is older than 39. But that said, when I did get together with Andrew in the early going, we tried to put together kind of the older people sticking together. But in my day to day, people seem to like me, or at least that's the impression I have. So I was kind of surprised to find out after the fact that so many people were put off by me, and I think that there was a little bit of the I don't have to do what you want me to do, Dad, to the cast this year, because when I would say things, people would kind of roll their eyes, and it's the same look I get from my 8-year-old son. When I'm trying to tell him what would be best for him at the moment, I get a lot of, well, I'll learn. And some people in the house ended up learning that turns out I did know what was better for their game.
Well, let's start from the very beginning then, because very first sort of big twist that happens is Andrew is given that goblet, and then he's got to choose between who's going to be in heaven and who's going to be in hell. I can't remember. Was it Olivia who had the goblet originally? Maddie who had the goblet originally.
Yeah, Maddie gave it to Andrew and effectively ended his game right then and there.
So in a hypothetical world, let's say Maddie has the goblet the whole time, does not hand it over. Do you think that your chances of being in hell and having to compete for that HOH are much greater?
I mean, probably. I think if you look around the house, I'm probably in hell in that first week. I think I've maintained all along, and I'm sure it got out, or maybe it didn't, but I've maintained all along that I thought that the right move in that situation was to put every man in hell, because then it would have been a chivalrous move. None of the guys would have begrudged him for putting them in hell, and the girls would have felt better about him putting them in hell. But if Maddie holds the goblet, I probably end up in hell.
So you mentioned about sort of the old people sticking together, and that's one thing that really like clicked in my mind when I saw you guys. It was like, yeah, there's always the younger sort of high school clique groups in Big Brother, but this season there was more than one or two people that were above their 30s or so. Yourself, Andrew, and Rosina, thinking of specifically, but there was some older people as well. Was there a lot of serious talk about like, hey, we need to team up before these cliques join up and we're picked off really easily? Because old people traditionally are pretty easy targets early on in the game.
Yeah, the old guy goes home a lot, typically early in the game, and so I want to try to avoid that. And there was a movement to try and save Rosina, and Andrew spearheaded the movement, and I kind of, people were coming to talk to me about it, saying, "Hey, are you down with this, or do you know what's going on?" And I said, "Listen, I'm not sure what's going on." I said, "If there's a move to send Ali out of the house, I'd be fine with that. I'm okay with that." But I saw the writing on the wall pretty quickly that Rosina was going to end up going home, which is unfortunate. I think Rosina had a lot to offer in the game, but yeah, it was tough to try and stick together with the older folks because, of course, Rosina was an immediate target because she cheered against Johnny in the HOH, and being the oldest person in the house, she was a safe nomination.
Yeah.
From Johnny's perspective. And then Andrew was so aggressive in his gameplay about trying to get Ali out the door instead of Rosie that he was persona non grata after the first week as well. So I would have loved to work with the older people and put something together, but the way the first week shook out, we all ended up on the outside looking in, and it made it very difficult to try and claw my way back into the game. And I realized right away that I wasn't going to be able to do that with Andrew in the situation that he was in, coming into my HOH.
Okay, and that's a perfect segue to lead
Right.
it week number two. So Rosina is evicted unanimously in following week one. We get into the HOH. At that stage, are you thinking to yourself like, man, I seriously need this HOH so badly?
I wasn't necessarily feeling like I needed the HOH, but as I'm sure you're aware, um, winning the HOH is not often something that you actively throw. I knew I wasn't in the good books with most of the house. I tried to get away from as much of the damage as I could, but I knew the way that people felt about Andrew, and Andrew and I were close because we had the same kind of pop culture touchstones. I talked to Andrew more than anybody else in the house. And with this cast in particular, I found that anytime you were seen having a conversation with somebody, you were obviously in an alliance with that person. And so, because of the way the house felt about Andrew, the house started to feel that way about me. And so, winning the HOH wasn't the worst thing for me, although, that was the mindset at the time. In retrospect, I think if Will wins that HOH instead, when we get down to that final two, if Will wins that HOH instead, my game might actually have survived a lot longer than it did.
So were you intending to win the HOH all along at that point, and then you just kind of, or were you not, and then you kind of won it by default? Because I think, didn't Will get the wrong answer, and then that's how you took the HOH, right?
Yeah, Will got the wrong answer, but that was strategy. I looked at the way it was going so far. The vast majority of the answers through that competition were answered incorrectly. I think there was only maybe 3 correct answers in that session. And that was Andrew had one right. He eliminated Olivia. Erica had one right. She eliminated Andrew, and I had one right, and I took out Kayla. And the rest of the answers were wrong, and people were getting eliminated because they were answering the questions wrong. So when I looked at the stats of it, I said, okay, well, these are all people we don't know that well. It only possibly takes 3 or 4 of the people to have agreed on a survey question to get the majority of the people. So at that point, Will had a 1 in 14 shot of being right, Whereas if I'm not guessing and he's guessing, I've got a 13 out of 14 shot that he's wrong. So once we got to that stage in the competition, I knew I was going to just wait until Will answered the question, and he either answered it right and won HOH, or he answered it wrong and I got HOH, but I wasn't willing to answer the question wrong on my own.
There was a lot of really harsh questions that were posed during that HOH for other people. I mean, don't get me wrong, Big Brother, Survivor, those games are really brutal, but like, was there a lot of like talking in the house afterwards amongst some of the people about like, hey, yo, you wouldn't attend my funeral, WTF and stuff? Like, was there a lot of tension?
There wasn't a lot of tension. We all just kind of shrugged off the survey in general because the questions that were answered were brutal. And you know, the questions that could have come up were also brutal. Like, we all kind of, after we did the surveys, we kind of said, okay, well, this is what it is. And, you know, it just is, hey, you've answered this after not knowing everybody for a little while, and these might change or whatever. Like, it was just, we all just kind of accepted it and moved on.
Okay.
I was, you know, I didn't get the most positive answer when I was the answer for who smells the worst. I wasn't too excited about that, but I don't know. I throw on the same deal. I just don't wear cologne. All the other guys in the house were walking around with a little bit of a cologne underneath their beard. I just take a deodorant and hope for the best.
You know what though? I given how big of a fan you are of the show, I thought, and given just the way you're analyzing things right now, I would have thought you would have been excited, because if you look at the history of smelly people who have played Big Brother Canada, Sarah Hanlon among one of the smelliest, and she did pretty damn good, and she's doing okay for herself.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at it as something that, you know, like Erica came over and she goes, oh, I think she mentioned that she might have put my name down, and she said, that early in the game, I just voted for the fat guy because fat guys normally smell, but you didn't smell. And I was like, oh, well, thanks, I guess. So, you know, as the fat guy, I pulled some votes that way, I think, too. I'm really not, I really wasn't all that concerned about it. It's not something that people have complained about to me in my everyday. So I don't know.
Okay, well, let's get into your HOH now.
Yes.
We see you talking about. We see Olivia's name being mentioned a lot. Was she always your prime target from the very beginning of your head of household?
Yes, 100%. Olivia was always going to be my target heading into the HOH. I watched what she was doing in week 1. She introduced herself, of course, as a beauty consultant, which she does. But she made no mention of law school, which kind of came out in those couple days before my HOH. She mentioned to me that she's a marathon runner. And so from an endurance perspective, that's very threatening. And she's obviously very intelligent. She's incredibly funny. And to me, when you're really funny and you're sharp with your wit, that's a sign of intelligence. And what Liv would do a lot of times was just lie there quietly, absorbing all the information. And then every once in a while, she'd fire out a razor sharp joke. And I thought, this is a person who's keeping her mouth shut, who's gathering a lot of information, is very intelligent, and has endurance capabilities. She's incredibly threatening from a long-term perspective. So Liv was the one that I wanted to get out because she was the one who I was most easily identifying as a threat at that moment. And so given a choice, I would have put Liv on the block. I'm not sure who I would have sat next to her. Erica being there was more of a, you know, hey, I've got to pick 4 people, and I'm not really feeling like I need to pick 4 people. And so let's put Erica up there because she's got a great picture. So yeah, it was less about her, but definitely, yeah, Liv was the plan all along. That's why I asked people who they thought they would see after the 4-week plan that was supposed to be going on, where it was going to be Andrew, Hamza, Marin, and Veronica voted out in the next 4 weeks, was the idea. And so I wanted to find out who everybody's plan was after that. and Liv's name came up a couple times, and I felt like I would have had the support to send her home if I could get her on the block.
So was it just then you mentioned all these qualities which are clearly like a huge threat and should be to anybody that's playing the game. Was it that made you feel like, okay, at this stage there's a good chance her name won't get picked for veto, so backdoor is a good option? Or did you ever strongly consider putting her straight up right away?
I never considered putting her straight up right away because the House effectively told me through all my conversations that if Andrew and Hamza aren't up this week, you go up next week. And so it was not even a veiled threat. It was a specific threat from a lot of people that if I didn't put them up, then I would see myself going home quite quickly. And so from self-preservation, I needed to nominate Andrew and Hamza right away. But the idea was always to get rid of Liv. One that I was seeing whether get rid of her. She was the one that I was trying to generate support for and see if people would be willing to send her out the door. And I had that support. I felt like if I could have got her on the block, then that was going to happen. So I wasn't necessarily afraid of her winning a competition, and that's why I didn't put her up. I was really trying to play the game with a little more finesse. Unfortunately, when you try and play the game with finesse and plans don't always go according to plan, and then you end up screwed.
So one of the things, it's interesting you mentioned finesse, because sort of my next point during your HOH week was the fact that you seemed, when you were talking to people about potentially throwing the veto and why they should throw it, and then how you should put up a different target, you were very careful and calculated, it seemed like, on not mentioning names on who would go up and who would necessarily be your target. Why were you that sort of careful? Was it just a question of like, I don't want word to get back to me and then my spot get blown up, or was there something else to you not mentioning names at that point?
It was still too early, I thought, to throw Liv's name out there, because I saw what happened in the previous week. As soon as Ali's name was circulated a little bit, everybody ran to everybody else to tell them what happened. And I mean, I think it probably damaged my game in the long run, because people told other people that they knew who my target was, and they put a lot of words in my mouth and lied about me. And that was a problem for me long term, because people accepted the lie and never came back to me to check with me. Kayla in specifics was confident through the middle of the game that she was going to be my backdoor target in week 2. And when I talked to her, I said, no, you were never my target. Like, it was never, ever going to be you. And as many times as I tried to reassure her of that, I'm not sure she ever believed it. So I'm hoping she's now seen the episode to see that she was never my third or fourth nominee.
So Andrew is evicted unanimously, another unanimous vote. Week number 3 comes around. Hamza takes the head of household. I guess even before Hamza wins HOH, how worried are you that your number one ally just went home, that those people might still be like, you know what, he did what we wanted him to do, but we're still going to go after him? Were you concerned that could happen?
Well, I was definitely concerned that was going to happen, but I also had to play the game as it lied. There was no opportunity for me to make that situation better at that moment, except maybe trying to duck out of the way. And again, everybody had been telling me that they were down with the 4-week plan. So to me, I was week 5 in that 4-week plan, but everybody as a house had agreed on night 1 before we got Marin and Veronica in the house that anybody who came out of the house was going on the block at their first opportunity. And so that wasn't, Hamza wasn't in on that plan, obviously, because he was one of the people on the plan. And he felt like he could work with Marin and made friends with Marin, so he didn't put him on the block. But I wasn't necessarily worried when Hamza was HOH that I was going home. I wasn't necessarily worried about week 3 after Hamza won. I thought there were other people that might be willing to send me home, but Hamza was never going to be that guy.
So following your HOH week, from what I was seeing, at least on the edited TV show, you seem to lay low for the next couple weeks. Was that a calculated and strategic move on your part to try and fade into the background, or is that just how things shook down?
Yeah, there was a big house meeting where Veronica called me out for being shady and all of those things right in the living room. And I realized that I needed to turn off the strategy for a week or two in order to reassure people that I wasn't that aggressive all the time, that I was only being that aggressive with the game because I was HOH. So I wanted to fade into the background. I avoided strategy over the next week. I walked into Hamza early and I said, I'm good. He's like, you're good. And I just took that. Anybody else that wanted to talk to me the rest of the way, they could. I was out at the pool table. They knew where I would be. I was walking laps around the backyard and people were free to hang out with me. And I can tell you, not a lot of people did.
So it's Jesse against Olivia going up on the block during that eviction. Was there any thought? Obviously, Olivia was your target that week. Was there any push to or any entertainment of the thought of getting Olivia out, given she was your target the previous week?
Well, I think Olivia and Jesse flip-flopped as house targets over the next couple days. But again, rumors started to circulate that I had a final 3 with Olivia and Allie, which was laughable to me because, of course, I was trying to get Olivia out the week before. But Jesse came to me the night before the vote, and he said, well, and I said, man, you haven't even talked to me since you went on the block. And I said, so why would I bother saving you? I said, at least Olivia's tried to pitch to me to keep her.
Yep.
And Jesse said, well, what's the point? You have a final 3 with Olivia and Allie. So why would I bother pitching to you? There's no reason for me to pitch to you. And I said, no, I think you've got that read completely wrong. And I said, and that you might regret that. And I think if I had kind of come to bat for Jesse with Hams, because Hams wanted Olivia gone too. Hams was on the Olivia train for quite a while, and he flipped because he felt the rest of the house flip. So Jesse didn't need to go home that week. I think he took his read of the house and didn't look for allies in unusual places. He just took the allies he had, and it never worked out that way.
And it didn't work out. Jesse is evicted from the house. And then we get to week number 4. And the big burning question for week number 4 was this huge rogue vote that was cast. Was it pretty simple to everybody there that it was Veronica? Was it sort of a consensus from everybody there that it was Veronica? Or was there a lot of doubt among people?
There was a lot of doubt initially because Veronica was adamant. Just vehemently adamant, swearing on it, accusing other people and running around. And of course, she was Lady Macbething, right? The lady doth protest too much. And so a lot of people are like, okay, well, it's Veronica. It had to have been Veronica. And I'm like, maybe not. I mean, I openly accused Kayla of it in the living room because I said it would make sense for her to try and tear the house apart because she would have felt like she had no allies at that point, having Jesse leave the house and it just being her and Derek. And she was aggressive about saying, no, it's not me. And here's why. And so, I mean, you know, I kind of walked out and said, the rogue vote doesn't matter because 9-2 is no different than 10-1. Just leave it. And then it's not a big deal. But yeah, I mean, a bunch of people accused Veronica right away. And I said, it could be, it might not be. I don't care one way or another. It was never a big deal to me who the rogue voter was because it doesn't matter. Go home 9-2, go home 10-1. What's the difference? The same guy's still going home.
Yeah, evicted or evicted, right? It really reminded me of week 1 of my season when there was this huge thing going around about like who cast that 4th vote when it was supposed to be an 8-3 for Kelsey to stay instead of Paige, and then it ended up being a 7-4, and then Dallas really kind of like had his
freaked out, blown
up, and freaked out because he cast. I mean, he made a few other mistakes that put him on the spot that week, but like, right. Yeah, either way. It was just like everybody in that week for you probably assumed Jesse was going home. That was the same thing with us. We were like, Kelsey's staying, Paige is going. That's it. Who cares?
And so it doesn't matter.
Right.
The end vote total does not matter. It's not like Survivor where a tiebreaker used to matter because of votes count against you in the past or cast against you in the past. That never happened this time. That's not a Big Brother thing, so why does it matter? I never understood people freaking out over vote totals. It just made no sense to me.
It's Big Brother though, and people will find any sort of excuse to try to blow people's spots up, make them a threat, or plant seeds of doubt or anything. Like that's the only thing I can come up with.
I mean, I thought about it when I was in the room and I sat down. I thought about pulling a rogue vote. I was like, it might be funny because they all think it's going to be 10-1. No one was suspected of me because, of course, I have a final three with Ali and Liv. Or allegedly. But, you know, like I thought, well, maybe I could throw another vote Liv's way. And then I walked out and it did happen. And I was like, I'm glad it wasn't me anyway.
So we get Veronica is put up on the block. It's Maddie and Marin. Veronica is backdoored. Veronica, I think, no surprise, kind of really self-imploded throughout. I mean, am I wrong? You can correct me if I'm wrong. But
no, Veronica. The story I love to tell about Veronica is one, and again, you know, her and I had a conversation where the two of us actively said, yeah, it's got to be Kayla and Derek. It's got to be Kayla and Derek. And she went, great, yeah, Kayla and Derek. And then she ran out of the room and ran right to Kayla. And I walked out and I see her whispering in Kayla's ear. And then Kayla shoots me a dagger look. So obviously Veronica's just relayed that conversation to Kayla, which means that I can't trust her anymore. And I feel like that was indicative of how Veronica played the game. A lot of times she played every side. And so when you're playing every side, everyone's going to notice that eventually. And it caught on to Veronica. People caught on to Veronica pretty quickly, and they were happy to send her out the door.
So Veronica is sent out the door. We get into the double eviction. And this is where, from my perspective, you kind of like emerged as more of a comp threat at this point. Do you think your performances in that HOH and then that veto kind of put you out there as a big threat or a big comp threat for people?
I mean, maybe. I mean, if people thought of me as a comp threat because I lost the one against Olivia by a half a second because we both hit the wrong answer. I just hit it faster. And then I won by a half second against Marin in a competition where I had one ball take out two targets and kind of got lucky that way. So I always tried to downplay my wins when people were discussing me as a comp threat. And then I would always try and play up my wins and my performances in those competitions when people were suggesting that you know, they didn't need to work with me because my comp wins weren't impressive. So I always tried to have that balance of trying to say, yes, it may not be impressive, but it's still more than you've won to some people. And then to others be like, no, don't worry about me. I got lucky because Will lost the challenge. I didn't really win it, even though it was entirely strategy on how I played that one. But yeah, it was a hard thing to kind of do, but I never would have considered myself a comp threat going in. I still wouldn't consider myself a comp threat by any stretch. Just because I won two doesn't mean that I was a threat for competitions, but in the right competition, I always had the potential to win. And I think that was something that other people didn't necessarily feel like they had at that point in the game.
So if in a hypothetical world, if Marin wins that veto, which he was very close to winning over you, do you still think that you're going to be good and you're not going to be evicted during that double?
I think if Marin goes home, or if Marin pulls himself down, Hamza still goes up. And I think Hamza still goes home. The way I go home in that hypothetical is if Marin or I don't win the veto. If one of the other people had won the veto, I think that I probably go home next to Marin. But if Marin wins the veto, I think he pulls himself off. Hamza still sits next to me, and Hamza goes home.
We see Hamza get evicted. We see a lot of emotion. From some people, I could understand the emotion a little bit. And I'm curious because Hamza was somebody who people universally talked about in the house as somebody who was really sort of had a Tony Vlachos like sort of game in Big Brother Canada. Maybe not quite as out there as Tony was on Survivor, but a lot of people talked about how he was so all over the place and really erratic with his gameplay. Did he have a more emotional impact on people? I could see it from Erica and Marin's perspective, how they were broken up, but we saw you even just like pounding inside the pantry, like angry and pissed off. The kid deserved a chance. Did we miss the emotional effect that Hamza had on people?
I think Hamza for me, and I think for Erica as well. Hamza, we really connected on an emotional level. We had all, I think, I don't want to say that we felt leaving our families behind more than others, but we certainly bonded together over that. And so Hamza and I talked a lot, and I, I was more upset because, of course, I'm the reason Hamza goes home in my mind at that moment, because I won the veto. And if I don't win the veto, then maybe Marin does go home, and, and maybe something like all of the what ifs are running through my head at that moment. And after losing Andrew in week 2, I lose Hamza, who, again, I thought, he and I could work together for a long, long time in that game, because people were always going to be aiming at him before me, and B, he was never going to be aiming at me. And so I know there were a lot of conversations in his HOH week that I was going to be the back door, but I think that's what people wanted to hear, or at least that's what I'm choosing to believe about Hamza afterwards. But I think there was moments where Hamza and I would have worked well together for a while, and put something together probably with Erica and maybe even Johnny down the road. So I think the four of us probably could have run the game for a while if we had our chance. But nevertheless, Hamza goes home, and I felt my game crumbling because week on week on week, I was losing people that I could work with as opposed to losing people that I couldn't. And so I really, I was really emotional about it. Hamza and I think there's a couple people from the season that I'm going to be good friends with and not just acquaintances. And I like to think Hamza is one of those guys. He's hysterical. He's really funny. And he's a really heartfelt guy, despite whether or not that came over through the show.
Yeah, for sure. And at the very least, he was really riveting television. Say what you want about his gameplay and himself as a person.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I haven't seen it yet because I can't bring myself to watch my HOH.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to seeing what Hams has.
I'll just say he brought in his limited amount of time in the house, he was definitely a standout character, no question. So let's get to week number 5 then. Erica wins the head of household.
Yes.
She talks a lot about floaters and wanting to be safe. Now, from my perspective, Erica had already painted a gigantic target on her back. Not only
tell me about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like easy for me to say as the Monday morning quarterback watching it on TV, but like I'm pretty sure you and everyone else there was on the same page that like Erica is a huge target, not only socially, strategically, but had been sort of one of the people sort of in the front of the pack, leading the charge, sort of thing. So Erica talks about, I need to minimize things, and I need to minimize my target by getting out some of the quote unquote floaters in the house, namely yourself. And was there any way you could spew logic to her about like, hey, you're already a huge target. Why not just take out all your competition? Because like, look at last year, Kevin, essentially it was Kevin and Demetrius who,
yes,
because there was nobody to compete with them. And there wasn't that many people at that stage of the game who were people who could like go toe to toe with an Erica from what I was seeing.
I told Erica right up front, I said if you put Marin and I up, or if you put Paris up, or if you put Maddie up, you're wasting your HOH, because powerful people are going to come for you, and you need to eliminate who you established as powerful people, because the target will never get smaller on you no matter what happens. And she said, I know, but I still feel like if I can take a week off, then people aren't going to be coming so hard for me anymore. And so I think, I mean, I recommended putting Kayla and Derek on the block at that point. The Red Room was working together at that point, it's my understanding, so that wasn't going to happen. But yeah, I mean, I told her straight up, I said, you need to take out the people who you consider to be the biggest threats outside of yourself to win. Otherwise, they're going to take you out when they get the chance. And that ends up being what happens towards the end.
So this was the first sort of split closer vote, and actually one of the few throughout the season. Now that I think about it, that wasn't a lopsided or unanimous vote one way or the other. One of the things that stood out to me was you campaigning to Paris, seemingly planting seeds, or maybe not planting seeds. I'm not too sure. So I want to know from you, when the whole confrontation happened with Ali and you talked to Paris about, like, hey, I heard her saying, I don't trust that bitch. Was that something you had actually heard, or was that just something you knew Ali would get riled up, so you would do that to blow her spot and make you look okay?
That is something I absolutely heard. If I hadn't heard it, I wouldn't have said it. And the reason I can say that is because I knew it would blow up on me in that week. There was no reason for me to go after Ali. Ali and I had been having conversations back and forth. We were good. But what I wanted to do was make sure Paris and Maddie, who I thought I was actually working with, I wanted to protect them because I saw them getting closer to Ali and Liv. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that Ali didn't trust her. And I mean, Ali told me that repeatedly throughout the season, that she never felt like she could really trust Paris. In the About Last Night competition, she said, Ryan, if you stay sober and evict me this week, I'll never forgive you. But if you do win HOH, and she was standing right behind Paris and she pointed down at her head. I believe I heard Ali say it. I will defend that forever, because that's what I believe I heard. And her pattern of behavior towards Paris throughout the game, I think, backs up the fact that it was probably Paris that was walking through the door and not Maddie. Unfortunately, I didn't know at that point that Paris was aligned with everybody in the house. And so she went over to Ali to confirm, and that blew up in my face. That's the one YouTube clip I have watched, was the conversation from right before I walked in the door. That was a pretty enlightening 21 minutes on YouTube.
It's interesting that you thought sort of the opposite, because when I was looking at it, I was like, you're just like taking this in. You're not getting defensive about it. You're not like losing your cool. Ali is clearly like going off the rails. So I'm like,
which is what people do when they're guilty.
Absolutely.
Which is what people do when they're guilty. But she didn't. The swearing on her mother worked out for her, because people believed in that. I think at that point, so many people were conditioned to think me slimy, that they were just willing to accept it. And I think it's going to be really interesting when people get home and watch the season back and they see, no, Ryan just told the truth consistently all the way through. When I told you were a threat, it's because you were being considered a threat. When I told you people were coming after you, it's because people were coming after you. I was never really trying to, I won't say I wasn't trying to manipulate the situation, because that's what the whole game is, but I was trying to manipulate it with truth as opposed to manipulate with lies. And I think people are not willing to separate a manipulation from a lie at that time. And people are like, well, why didn't you just hold on to that information? Like, I could have done that too, but that's just as much manipulation as sharing the information. So I always tried to share, manipulate, and do that with truth and with honesty, because I felt like if people believed me and could work with me on that standpoint, then that does, and as awful as this is about to sound, when people trust you, that gives you the opportunity to break that trust if you need to later. And you see it season after season after season. People work together forever, and then they stab each other in the back towards the end of the game. You can't do that unless you have trust. And in my head, you can't have trust without some sort of honesty. So I was always trying to be honest with people as much as I could, because I thought if you do get to the end, then the honesty plays for just that one extra vote where you need it to.
Do you think that people were never like going along with you because of the way you were saying it? Because I'm like you, everything you were saying in most of your conversations throughout the season were like usually bang on 100% accurate. So do you think it was just like a different generation gap, like, oh, this older parent and stuff is like trying to like show me the ways and respect your elders kind of thing? Or do you think it was the way that you were saying it to them, or why do you think it was that they weren't going along with it?
I know I can come off somewhat condescending a lot, and that's mostly because I'm a guy that really kind of cherishes efficiency, do things as fast as possible, and so I didn't want to. I'm not a coddler. I'm not the guy that's going to talk to you for a half an hour to make you think that my idea is your idea and you just came up with it. Which is why I went home, because that's what Johnny did very effectively the week I went home. But I do know that came off in the house as condescending. I know that came off in the house as I'm telling you what to do. And, you know, when I tried to not be that guy, that's when Erica nominates me and Marin instead of Derek and Kayla, because I tried to tell her, hey, you know, your target's not getting any smaller and you should think about other targets and everything. And I tried to make her, you know, think about her own game from that perspective, and it just never worked out. So, yeah, I went at people a little aggressively from that standpoint because that's the way they saw me anyway. And so if I flipped into a different person and a different personality, then I think people would lend even less credence to what I was saying, because, well, Ryan doesn't normally come up all wishy-washy and garbage and pleading and all that stuff. Ryan normally just tells it how it is. And so if he's not doing that now, then he must be lying. You know? And so I was in a tough spot, but yeah, I know that there was a lot of, you know, I'll show you, old man. I'll do whatever I want, old man. And there's nothing you can do about that. There's nothing you can do when a 23-year-old wants to look at you and go, oh, I'll prove you wrong. You know, there's not much you can do there except wait for them to get home and realize that they're not proving anything.
Either way, you make it through that week. Marin is evicted. We get to week number 6. Kayla takes the head of household. My question for you with this one is going
7?
back to your 6 or 7.
Well, it's our 6th week in the house, but because of the double, yeah.
Yeah. Either way, Kayla's HOH.
Yeah, Kayla's HOH.
I failed math so many times. It's not even funny. So let's just forget it. Forget about that. Whatever happened next in sequence.
Yes.
Kayla winning the head of household after Marin is evicted.
Yeah.
We can all come to that agreement. The two of us were on the same page on that. Good.
Yeah.
Good. So Kayla wins head of household. Going back to your head of household, we talked about how you were so careful about not throwing names out. This week, you were not careful at all. You were just like, I'm just going to throw everything out there, everything with truth about the names you were throwing out there. Why did you choose to throw names out there at that point? Was it simply because, you know what, I got nothing to lose?
No, at that point, I realized that Maddie had played me, and she's proud to admit that she did it. Maddie had played me, and I felt like at that moment, because Maddie had sent me to Johnny, because Maddie had sent me to Paris, because Maddie had sent me to Will, I figured that they were all in on it, and that they were collectively throwing me under the bus by making me have all these conversations so that they could say that they had me have these conversations. And so, you know, I always felt like Kayla was somebody I could absolutely work with in a long-term sense. And somebody I wanted to work with. And we had made that, you know, her and I had agreed with Derek before the double eviction that we weren't going to target one another until after the double. And then once we got through the double, we said, okay, well, we'll keep not targeting each other and see how this works and see if we can build trust here. And so, when I had that conversation with Maddie and she said, they're going to send you home unless you target Dela, I realized that the only way I could stay, or I believed that the only way I could stay, was to go after them. And I did go after them. I went after them aggressively. But I found out after the fact, of course, that wasn't necessary. I didn't need to do that, and I was going to stay anyway. So what it did, it blew up my game for real. I mean, not that being on the block for a third consecutive week didn't let me know that my game was pretty much over. It moved from almost over to completely unrecoverable at that point, because Kayla was going to be very aggressive about coming after me, and she did so.
So with you talked about, it's interesting about you and Derek, and you wanting to work with Derek and Kayla for a long time. Did that pretty much, like, when you are nominated in seemingly what looked like a last minute decision by Kayla to put you up on the block next to Will, when you see your face up there, are you just like, all right, that's it, I'm done with Derek and Kayla, first chance I get, they're gone?
I mean, I realized that relationship was irreparable, and that, yes, I would have gone after them as soon as I could, of course. But it's funny, everybody, the perception is that was a last minute nomination. And everybody walking around the house that day had been saying to me, you're the safest guy in the house because she's not going to put you up. And my response to everybody was, yeah, she is. It's just going to, like, she's telling you what's going to happen, but yeah, she's going to put me up. There's no question. So I think I was the least surprised person in the room outside of Derek and Kayla that I was on the block that week. I expected to be. I knew I would be. And I was. So it wasn't necessarily a surprise to me. It was a surprise to everybody else. And when that happened, I was kind of like, guys, this is who Kayla is. This is what I've been telling you for weeks. Why are you not recognizing this? And why have you not gone after them? And she gave her word to every one of them that I wasn't going on the block. And then she broke that in spectacular fashion. So to me, I was like, how does anybody believe her the rest of the way when she played the game this way, this right now? And I thought, boy, if I can survive this week, it's going to be easy to go after them because of the way they manage this HOH. And then turns out I did survive the week through no work of my own.
Well, before we get into that, the one curious thing I have is we saw Kayla talking on the show about the potential of getting Johnny out at that point, about backdooring Johnny. Was that a common knowledge thing to anybody else in the house, or was that just something Kayla kept to herself and maybe a little bit with Derek as well?
It certainly wasn't common knowledge to me, but it wouldn't have surprised me to find that out. Johnny was an incredibly threatening player. And they ended up nominating him the next week. But, yeah, it was never anything they told to me. It's funny to me that Johnny gets the credit for Maddie's move. Johnny was getting the credit for Maddie's move that week to have me target Dela actively and openly. It was a little surprising to find that out after the fact. But yeah, I mean, Johnny ends up winning HOH that week. I think it would have been a lot different had he used it on either Will or I to take us off the block, because I think at that point, I actually don't know whether or not Kayla nominates Erica in that spot and tries to backdoor Erica out of the house. But I think the game would have shifted substantially in one way or another if Johnny had used the veto that week to either pull Will or I off the block.
Let's talk about when Canada saves you from eviction on eviction night that time. We saw some clips of you sort of talking to Canada, help a guy out here and so on. You're a diehard fan of the show like I am. So I'm assuming you probably went into it thinking not only do you have to like ingratiate yourself within the house, but in Canada, there's a lot of twists where the
Yes.
popularity is very important as well. So did you make a conscious choice when you're in there to portray yourself in a way that was popular enough, at least, that there maybe wasn't necessarily going to be a twist like a Canada's HOH or like a power shift, like essentially that twist was? Did you purposely play to the cameras a little bit, knowing there
all the time
to say like that?
All the time. If you're not playing to, if you go into the house, if you're watching this in an effort to gain strategy, first, don't nominate your allies. Second, second, talk to the cameras, talk to the feeders. The feeders are, to me, what brought this show back. I mean, people got on Twitter and they advocated for it, but the internet was responsible for there being a season 6. So to ignore the fact that the internet is watching you at all times is really astronomically dumb. I think you need to be constantly aware that the cameras are there. I think you need to be constantly aware that people are watching you. And I think you need to let the cameras know what you're doing. And what you're trying to do. All the time when I was alone, I never just sat there inside my own head, because I can have the conversation inside my head out loud with the camera. So why wouldn't I? It gives Canada the opportunity to get you to know you better, and it gives the internet the opportunity to decide whether or not you're worth saving. And that's what happened to me that week. And I don't know whether or not it's because people liked me, because people hated Kayla, because people, didn't like, whatever reason it was that I got 51% of the vote. I got 51% of the vote. And so when you look at, if there's any lesson I can teach you, it's that the cameras are your best friend. And let's not forget the people at Big Brother. If you're just sitting there quietly stroking a man's hair for weeks on weeks on weeks and not giving them anything to work with, they have nothing to work with. And so they can't put you on TV if your entire contribution to the season is sitting alone in a bedroom staring at a wall. They're only going to put you on TV if you provide them with content. And so, if you're not talking to the cameras, I think you're losing an opportunity to just be focused on in the episode, let alone anything else.
Yeah, no question. And I think at this stage of Big Brother Canada, I can see people not realizing this maybe when you're going into the inaugural season of Big Brother, because at that point, the US one is more catered to how well you are, how good you are with people in the house, as opposed to the audience voting. The Canadian one is a bit of a hybrid, in my opinion, of the US concept of the HOH, the veto nominations and stuff, but there's also the Europe, the UK, and the Australia, and all those other aspects of it as well, because your popularity will play a factor no matter what. So
potentially. I mean, if I'm sitting there next to Erica, I don't get saved. She does.
Sure.
If I'm sitting next to, the fact that I got saved, I also understand the fact that I got saved versus Will. I don't know that I get saved versus other people. Right. And so, that's part of it too. I mean, I did everything I could to play the game as hard as I could. And I'm hoping that there were a lot of pro Ryan votes as opposed to anything else. But, I also understand the circumstances of that save.
Now, with that though, in Big Brother, there's an upside and there's a downside, and it seems a little crazy to think when you're going home and you get saved that there is a downside. But the way I'm looking at it is, Canada saves you, everybody sees that. So do you think, in a sense, in the long term, that may have hurt you? Like, obviously, it prolonged your life in the game, but at the same time, everybody there saw that and sees, wow, Canada saves you. So Ryan, they automatically, some of them would have to assume, like, wow, he's got some sort of a popularity thing. What if there's another twist here down the line? Ryan is a bigger threat than we thought. Did you?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of both. I mean, I tried to play it off as though Canada always, because I had said early in the season, and it was right, Canada voted in the Angels. When you look back at Big Brother Canada history, they typically vote in the nicest person. and they give rewards to the nice people. They don't give rewards to jerks. And so I tried to play that. I tried to say, hey, listen, like, there's a reason Canada voted for me. It's because I'm not the liar you think I am. And Canada's seeing that I'm telling the truth all the time. So you should work with me because I'm the guy that Canada trusts to keep in the House. Unfortunately, Erica goes home, and there were a couple people that I was working with that I could have worked with longer that were upset because my coming off the block meant that Erica went home. And so there was that. In addition, you're right. There were people who said, well, what if it's 8 on the jury and Canada votes, and then Ryan will win the Canada vote because he's already won the Canada vote? And I'm like, yeah, great. You can still win 8-1. Like, that's, I tried to downplay that aspect as much as I could. But in the back of my head, I was like, well, if it's 8 plus Canada votes, I might have a vote in my pocket already. So yeah, it was, you try and downplay all your positives in the House as much as you can, especially when it comes to Canada.
Yeah, no question. So you're taken off the block by Canada. Erica is put up. We see a lot of, I mean, your season in general, I thought really took the cake in terms of like really intense evictions and people just not taking it lightly. There wasn't your typical like, oh, hugs, thanks guys, good game, and etc. We saw that really on display with the Erica eviction, and then later on when Ali is kicked off in the before the triple eviction. But the Erica one was pretty. It ranks up there in terms of like the tension with that eviction. So after that, we see Will really losing his mind about the 2 people that voted for him. And obviously, Will was somebody who was a pretty emotional guy from what I was seeing on the outside.
Just a little.
Just a little smidge. He took things a little bit to heart. So was there any way you could have smoothed things over? Because in my opinion, I was like, it's not that big of a deal. Ryan did what anybody would do in that situation, is give somebody who other people thought they were close to their vote. I feel like you would have looked untrustworthy had you voted the opposite way to evict Erica. So was there any way to patch things up with Will, or were you just like, that's Will and there's nothing I can do?
Well, I expected Will to freak out. I did. And I told him, I said, listen, like, Erica and I were very close. She was going to save me if it came down to a tiebreaker vote. And so, of course, I'm going to vote to save Erica because Erica's always had my back. And I said, Will, you and I have been rocky the last couple weeks. And I said, and that's because I felt like you didn't have my back. And he goes, well, I've always had your back. And turns out, I mean, he said that to everybody. And I asked him once in the jury house, I said, well, Will, you and I made a deal on day 2 that we were going to run together as far as we could because we both had kids and we were the only ones in the house with kids. And he said, well, yeah, but that was all game. My relationship with Johnny was real, but I was playing you all along. And I was like, oh, well, thanks. That's great to know, especially because you freaked out for me breaking loyalty to you. But yeah, it was really weird seeing Will's reaction, especially because he stayed. So instead of being all right, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier with the rogue vote in Veronica. Everybody was so mad because they assumed that was the way the vote was going to go. Well, I think Will was expecting a 7-0 vote when he sat down that night. And the fact that he didn't get a 7-0 vote really pissed him off. What surprises me is that people didn't vote to keep Erica. Because in my head, if Erica stays, she is going to very angrily be pursuing Derek and Kayla at the expense of everybody else. She's not going to look at anybody else. It's going to be only Derek and Kayla. And to me, the girl that's won alternating HOHs for a couple weeks or vetoes, that's the person you want in the house targeting Dayla when they put her up. So I think if they had, if Ali and Liv had decided to keep Derek and Kay, or to keep Erica instead, again, who ifs and nuts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a happy Christmas or whatever that expression is. ifs and buts, not ifs and nuts. That doesn't make any sense. Uh, but if the way that all went down, to me, the right move at that moment was evicting Will. And it was a pity vote for Erica because I knew she was going home, but the strategy said to keep the stronger player at that moment, because a fired up stronger player is way better off than anybody else. And then we end up walking into the backyard and Derek wins his HOH in a competition that Erica might have done very well in. And so you took away the opportunity to have somebody actively targeting Derek and Kayla. And you could have turned on them as a house, and those two made it to the final three. So obviously they made the wrong choice there.
Could you have smoothed things over with Will if you had found a cod in the fridge and kissed it right in front of him, or taught him a delicious bass of some sort?
Yeah,
was that the only way? Because I was thinking of it right now, and I was like, how do you like appease Will? And I don't know.
What amazes me about the whole thing was that our task, and the only way we were getting the party is if we make Will fail his task.
Right.
I'm the only reason we got that party. Everybody else, Will succeeded. With me, he failed. I'm the only reason we get that party. And afterwards, Will was still really pissed that I didn't kiss the fish, too. And I'm like, dude, if I kiss the fish, we all get punished. I didn't kiss the fish, and we got a party. And everyone's like, hey, Will, thanks so much for all your hard work getting us this party. I'm like, Will didn't do shit. If Will had sat on the couch for an hour and nobody did anything, we still would have got the party. No matter what Will did, we were getting the party as long as one of us doesn't kiss the fish. So it's not Will that got us the party. It was Ryan that got us the party. And as a result, Will was angry at me because I wouldn't kiss the fish. Will was angry at me because I voted against him. And so he was actively campaigning for Johnny, who also voted against him. And then lied to his face about it.
Yeah,
I'm amazed. I'm amazed by Johnny's hold on Will, that he could be like, yeah, sweetie, I did lie to you, but vote for me anyway. And he did it.
Well, let's get into that then. So
Yeah.
Let's start off. Derek wins the head of household. It
Yes.
seemed to me at that point that if Derek didn't win, that Dela is probably going up on the block in that situation.
Yes.
But Derek takes the head of household. In your mind at that point, are you thinking, all right, well, I'm taking a seat right back on the block?
Of course I knew I was going to be nominated at that moment. You know, I told Derek the night before that if I told Derek on Wednesday night, I said, yeah, if I win HOH tomorrow, I'm putting Kayla up. Just so you know, I'm putting Kayla up. I said, I won't put you up. I'll put her next to Maddie. I said, but if Maddie comes off, then you're going to go up next to Kayla. I knew I was going up. Of course I was going up. But I didn't want to lie to Derek either. And again, that's what I was trying to build my game on, which is honesty and integrity. And if I could get away with not lying to Derek at that moment and get away from that week and escape, I thought I was good for a long time. I thought that the window to evict me was in that window. And once that window closed, I felt like I was going to be good for a while. The window doesn't close, and Derek puts me on the block.
And it was I was going through it throughout the week, and I was like, how is Johnny going to be able to do this? Because there's two sides sort of on opposite ends, and Johnny's got to play a really dangerous game to plant seeds on one side, but he can't really bring all the groups together because then they're just going to talk to each other and realize full of crap. So, like, what do you think it was? Do you think there was a single thing that you could have done? Because we saw mostly Johnny being really aggressive on the show, and you kind of hanging back. What was your pitch to people that as to why you should stay?
My pitch consistently was, well, why would you keep Johnny? Johnny was one of the strongest players of the season, And if your thought is we eliminate Erica because she's strong, we eliminate Jesse because he's strong, we eliminate Hamza because he's strong, why are you eliminating me when Johnny's sitting there on the block? You've got your shot. Take it. Send Johnny out the door, because if not, he had the potential to run for a very long time in the game. And he did win the next HOH. You know, when I was sitting in that living room meeting with Veronica in week 2, I said, if you don't send Hamza home instead of Andrew, Hamza's going to win HOH and one of you are going home because of it. And they didn't. They didn't send Andrew home, or they didn't send Hamza home. He wins and sends Jesse home. I said the same thing about Johnny. I said, if you don't send Johnny home, it's going to cost one of you your game because he's going to be HOH. And he was. It made zero sense to keep Johnny at that point. You know, against Marin, I needed to fight because Marin and I were in a spot where I was the more competitive player from a threat perspective than Marin was. Against Will, I felt like I needed to fight because I was the more threatening person to everybody's end game than Will was. Against Johnny, I shouldn't have had to fight because Johnny was far more threatening to an end game perspective than I was for everybody else in the house. And yet they evict me unanimously.
So one of the conversations that was interesting during that week was Allie talked about wanting to work with you, though the person who,
yes,
from the show perspective,
she swore to me,
sort of like bitter.
Swear.
You guys were like bitter enemies from what we were seeing on the show, the way it was building it up. You talked about out loud to her, I believe, about how much you trusted Paris, and essentially that. I don't know if you said it directly, but you kind of hinted at like how tight you and Paris were, and sort of like a ride or die situation. Do you think that conversation had any sort of an impact on Allie and in sequence Liv as well? That, well, he mentioned Paris, so maybe he's tighter with Paris than he is with us, and he'll be more loyal to her. Do you think that had anything to do with it?
I mean, entirely possible, but to me, the context of the conversation was, who else do you want in the top 4? That was the conversation we were having. She said, obviously, she said, the 3 of us are going to go final 3, because that's when the final 3, Allie, Liv, and Ryan Deal actually came to pass, was in that week. Despite it being rumored for weeks and weeks and weeks. It finally came to pass that week, or at least I thought it was going to. And then when they asked me, they said, okay, well, you know, what about Paris? And I said, well, I don't. I said, I trust Paris implicitly. I know you guys don't trust Paris because you've told me you don't trust Paris. So that's fine. I said, but this is a conversation for after the triple. This is a conversation for well down the road, not a conversation for now. And I said, plus, you and Liv and I have agreed now between us to be a final 3. And I'm not going to go back on my word. But so if it comes down to it, you know, Paris will go at 4. I said, but I'm fine carrying Paris to 4 because we get along really well and I like hanging out with her. And so that was going to be the idea. Now, if that ended up costing me my game because Allie believed I was more loyal to Paris than I was to her, well, you only came to me 3 days ago. I've been working with Paris for a long time. So it would have surprised me to find out that would be something that she now found threatening.
Yeah, in all honesty, I don't think that was the fatal flaw at all. I think it was just one of those situations where a lot of people that were left in there were always overthinking things and being like, Johnny, you know, Johnny's big target. Johnny's a comp threat. Johnny's gonna take out Derek and Kayla, and that's gonna be their priority. And then
when they had the opportunity to have that happen, they didn't.
The next week, yeah, they didn't take it. Exactly.
The next week, they didn't
funny.
even take that. Yeah. They sent Allie home instead.
Right.
So I mean, it was. I mean, and that's not on Johnny, and that's not on Allie, who are the 2 people I'm talking about. But I mean, I need to give credit where credit's due. The fact that I went home was fully because Johnny destroyed the game that week. Johnny played a superb week of Big Brother, made promises all over the place, and fulfilled those promises when he took Derek and Kayla and nominated them the next week. So Johnny played a spectacular week of Big Brother. And so it's not necessarily that I lost to Johnny that week. It's that Johnny won. And I think that there are those are two very different concepts. Johnny flipped the game on its ear. And I had a huge lead in the fourth quarter, and he put on a massive comeback. Full credit to him for staying that week.
Yeah, for sure. So you're sent off to the jury house. I want to go back a few weeks because I'm curious if this had any impact on your vote at all. Obviously, we know as fans of the show that not only do we assess everything about somebody's game, how they are socially, strategically, how they are comp-wise and whatnot, but when it comes down to it, and we can understand it more when we're in there, a lot of it comes down to how you're treated and the way that you send people to jury. I want to go back to when Kayla nominated you. She had some very aggressive, very harsh words for you, to say the least. Did those words and some of the other things Kayla had said, not only to yourself, but to Erica leaving, did those things resonate with you and still hit home and have any sort of effect on your jury decision?
I think if Kayla was sitting next to Will on finale night and I voted for Will, then people would have a lot better case for saying that Ryan had a bitter vote. Mm-hmm. Was I going to vote for Kayla? Probably not. And there were a lot of reasons why, none the least of which because she said it in her final speeches. She really felt like she ran the game from day one. And the impression that I had inside the house and the impression that I had from everybody when they got to the jury house was that wasn't the case. And so I voted for Paris, not because Kayla called me I believe it was a condescending liar that had manipulated everyone in the house. I'm not sure if that's an exact quote, but those are 3 words I remember pretty specifically. That's not why I didn't vote for her. I didn't vote for her because Paris played the best. If she'd been sitting next to Derek, I would have been able to have been convinced to vote for Kayla. If I would have voted for Kayla. But she was sitting next to Paris, and Paris won the final 4 HOH. Paris won the final 3, and Paris was responsible for swinging the vote to see a lot of people leave. You look at her allies that left the house between myself, Johnny, Addie, Will. Every was an ally of Paris's at the moment that Paris flipped on them and convinced the rest of the allies to send them out. How do you not vote for that?
So if it's Derek against Kayla in a final 2 situation, are a lot of people's votes live and it's just based on how well they convince them in that moment? Or are people swinging one way or the other if it's Derek versus
My impression of Derek versus Kayla is that it would have been Kayla's game to lose. That's my impression of my conversations with the jury beforehand. That said, I don't know whether or not say where Paris's vote would have landed, because obviously she took Kayla because she had a better chance against Kayla than she had against Derek. That was just female empowerment or whatever. But I can't imagine Paris having played the game that well all the way along. Took Kayla because she believed that she was going to have an all-girl final, as opposed to taking Kayla because she believed she could beat Kayla better than Derek. But I do think it was Kayla's game to lose sitting up against Derek. I would have needed to be convinced, certainly, because I thought there was a lot of subtlety to Derek's game that I really appreciated. But I think it was Kayla's game to lose against Derek.
Last question for you, Ryan. As a diehard super, first off, was this your first time? I'm just curious. Was this your first time trying out for the show?
6 auditions.
6. You tried out every single time. Wow. Okay.
Every single season. And I was first in line in season 1. I was first in line in season 4 and in season 6.
So I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say then. Was there a point after like second time, third time where you were just like, maybe this is not gonna be a thing, or did you always think in your mind like it's gonna happen eventually? My time is gonna come.
Based on the math, in order to get the population of Canada through Big Brother, you'd need 2 million or so seasons. I would have kept auditioning till I died. I will. I when they brought back season 6 and they announced that season 6 was happening, I told everybody in my life that the only reason they brought it back is because I hadn't played yet, and this was my time, and it was going to be my season to play. And so yeah, I would have just kept coming and just kept coming and just kept coming. I need, like I said in the pre-package in episode 1, it wasn't a game I wanted to play. It was a game I needed to play, and I was going to keep trying to play it until that happened. And believe me, as soon as they announce season 7, I'm going to put myself out there and say, hey, if you are bringing back vets, I want to play. Because I want to play. I need to play. I will keep playing forever as long as they ask me. Because I can't. I love the game so much. I love the concept of the game so much, and I'd love the idea of playing as a returning player, because I think that's such a different aspect to the game than the initial concept of going in fresh. So I think it's very neat to have the idea that I could have a completely and entirely different experience because I've already played once, rather than what I had in season 6.
Yeah, and I'm 100% the same way. Even though I experience almost everything there is, except for winning the 100 grand, I would want. And you call me tomorrow, I'm on a plane and I'm in Toronto. I don't care about my contractual obligations with my job or my rent or anything else.
Right.
I'll, like, let somebody else have to deal with it. They'd ask me to do Big Brother, I'm there. Like, no question about it.
So a bow tie alliance, right?
Bow tie alliance. There we go. The all boat. Let's keep that on the DL though. Good thing I don't have too many.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, quite. So I'm curious. You tried out 6 times. Did you think that benefited you? And the reason I say that is I tried out 3 times, and I felt every single time I was more and more sort of into the game throughout the audition process myself. And we've seen so many other really successful people who played US or Canada try out several times. I think Evil Dick tried out about 7 or 8 times before he got on. Dan, I think, took him 4 times. Me, it took me 3 times to get on. You, it took you 6 times. Do you think having been through the process so many times helped you get really sort of in the zone and prepared for the game?
I think every time I went, I did feel more prepared for that initial open call, because I open called every time. I was never a video guy. I went to the open call every single season. And so, yeah, I was familiar with how the initial process worked. And after that, if I talk about it anymore, I feel like I'm going to hear Ryan stop talking about production. But it just because you didn't get on the first time you auditioned doesn't mean anything. I think I want to say of this year's cast, there was maybe 3 or 4 that hadn't auditioned before, but almost everybody else had an audition story to tell inside the house. So yeah, absolutely don't give up. If this is something you want to be and this is something you want to do, then get out there and keep doing it. Make them know that you need to be on the show, and learn from not getting called back. If you answered certain questions in the open call a certain way and you didn't get a call back, that doesn't mean anything either, because the casting agents that are there and the producers that are there, they might not be on top of their game at that moment either. If the coffee hasn't kicked in yet for somebody, that could just keep going, because if you're destined to be on the show, you'll be on the show.
Absolutely. Final question for you, Ryan. Having been such a diehard super fan and being on the show, getting all the way to the jury, is there one moment in the house that stands out for you as like your highlight during your experience?
I think to say to not say Canada saves would be disingenuous, because I think that was the moment, the highest moment for me. But actually winning the veto, because my HOH week, I watched Will lose, which was strategy, and it helped me win. But winning the veto, pulling myself off the block, being one of the few times that the veto actually got used in season 6, was the highlight for me, because I actually won that. And the walking into that competition, I believed that I was going to lose if I didn't win. And I was going to go home if I didn't win. So winning that veto probably stands out as the highlight for me of the season. Despite everything else, and Canada saving me is the best I felt in the house throughout everything, because everything that happened after that, I still was able to carry that in my pocket, that Canada saved me. But yeah, winning the veto was probably the best achievement I had in the house.
Well, Ryan, this was an absolute pleasure talking to you. Not only was it a thrill watching you on TV and seeing your insights on the game and the way you analyze things, I thought it was a very unique thing that I hadn't seen from too many people who had played Big Brother Canada before. So I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank you for your really good insight into this podcast. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, an absolute pleasure. Anytime, every time you want to talk, I'm just a Google Hangout away.
Before we head out, though, Ryan, for people who want to know what is going on in the life of Ryan, how can they do so?
The first thing I would suggest is follow me on Twitter. I'm BB Can Ryan on Twitter. I'm Podcaster Ryan on Instagram. You can follow me there. I'm trying to figure that out. And apparently I'm that on Snapchat, whatever that is. Those are the ones you can look for. And of course, if you're a CFL fan at all, as well as being a Big Brother fan, I recommend you check out my podcast there. It's called Horseman Radio. It is available on iTunes and all the other places you can get a podcast. But so Twitter is the easiest way to get a hold of me. If you got something for me, that's the best way to get a hold of me is BB Ken Ryan on Twitter. But check out the Horseman Radio podcast. Give it a download, give it a listen, or at least just download it. I don't even care if you listen to it. It just boosts my numbers.
What's the biggest thing that football fans in the Canadian Football League should look forward to heading into the season? Because we're getting into preseason right away here. What's the number one thing that fans should look forward to right now?
For me in this season and as we get through training camp here, it's the excitement of bringing just CFL football back in general. I love CFL football. I think it's the best brand of football there is in the world, despite what a lot of NFL fans will tell you. I think the CFL game is better. The idea that football is back is something. As a Stampeders fan, I've watched my team dominate the league for the last 10 years, and I expect that to continue into this season. And as long as Bo Levi Mitchell is the quarterback here, I expect us to be very competitive. So wherever you are, if you're coming to Calgary for a game, let me know. You can come on by on my tailgate party, our tailgate party for the Horseman Radio show. You can come by our tailgate party and hang out, and we can talk football. We can talk Big Brother. It'll be a good time.
And as myself being a Winnipeg Blue Bombers fan and a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, I feel your pain the last couple of years about like sometimes almost getting there and then never quite getting there. I
was so rooting for Jacksonville. Only because of The Good Place. The Good Place is my favorite show on TV.
Yeah.
And they love Blake Bortles. Yeah. And so I was like, well, the Cowboys are out. So I'm going to root Jacksonville and hope for my boy Blake Bortles. Yeah, but unfortunately, they didn't pan out.
At the very least, I can probably proudly say that I am one of the only people that will go out into the public sporting a Jacksonville Jaguars jersey. I don't think you can see that many people in Jacksonville going out there sporting the Jags swag.
No, the Jags are not that good a team, but the Bombers are going to be good this year, I think. And now that they've added Adam Bighill to their middle linebacker spot, I think they're going to be trouble. I think it's going to be I think the West is going to be hyper competitive this year.
Well, we'll see. I mean, fingers crossed. Eventually, one of the curses will be broken and they'll finally get that cup ring. But I've been saying that ever since I was a kid and started supporting them in the 90s, right? And the 90s was the last time they won a Grey Cup. So
1990, yeah, it's been 28 years.
That's insane for like the CFL, a team of mostly 8 at that time and now 9 teams, that they couldn't even just like sneak one win in once in a while. Like, really?
Well, I'm hoping not this year, because the Grey Cup's in Edmonton, and so that's just a nice little 3-hour drive away. So I'm going to get to go up there, and I'll be hanging out there for Grey Cup entirely. And yeah, it'll be a pretty good time. I'm hoping the Stampeders will join me there.
Absolutely. Well, guys, if you guys liked this podcast, feel free to give it a thumbs up in the section below. You can always like and subscribe to my podcast on Random Thoughts. And stay tuned, because next week I am very excited to have Olivia and Allie, the Ding Dongs, will be on the show on Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. So really looking forward to that. You guys can also follow me on Twitter at JoelBBCan. My Facebook is Joel Big Brother Canada, and JoelBBCan4 on Instagram. Thank you so much to Ryan for his time. Thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys again soon. Toodles!